Welcome, everyone. My name is Kevin Gallagher. I'm the director of the Global Development Policy Center at Boston University. Our mission is to advance policy-oriented research on financial stability, human well-being, and the environment across the world. One of our signature programs is called the Global China Initiative that looks at the social, economic, and environmental impacts of Chinese overseas investment, trade, and economic activity. And part of that is our Global China Research Colloquium, where folks who work inside the GDP Center and outside present new and forthcoming work that folks have been engaged in. Before I introduce today's speaker, let me just invite you back for November 17th. At the same time, we'll have Yangtze Lu, one of our postdoctoral fellows, who will be doing very interesting research on what are some of the factors that trigger certain Chinese overseas energy plants to be delayed. Today, we're really excited to have Yan Wang present today on Chinese investment, et cetera, and structural transformation in Africa. Yan Wang has a PhD in economics from Cornell University. She worked for a long time at the World Bank, has been associated with the Institute for New Structural Economics at Beida or Peking University in China. With Justin Yifu Lin, she is the author of a book just a couple of years ago with Cambridge University Press called Going Beyond Aid, Development Cooperation for Structural Transformation, which today's research stems from that work. And we're happy now to have Yan Wang is a senior economist here at the GDP Center. The way these colloquia go, we ask the speaker to limit her presentation to 25 to 30 minutes, and then there should be a good amount of time to have questions and answers with all of you folks and have a global discussion about this. You'll notice in the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom a little Q&A button. And in that button, that's where you can click in and put in your question. Please tell us your name and your affiliation so we can all get to know each other, and then enter your question in there, and I'll field 3 or 4 at a time and present them to Dr. Wang. So without further ado, I pass it on to Yan Wang. Thank you, Yan.
Thank you, Kevin, for your kind introduction. It is a great pleasure and honor to have the opportunity to present my work with Justin Lin. This work has been done for one of the chapters for the World Bank entitled Africa and China in the post-COVID era. So let me share my screen. Can you see my slide? Yes. Yes. The title is Economic Transformation in Africa and How China Can Best Support It. So this is for a World Bank book. I would like to express my thanks to my co-author, Justin Lin, and the GDP Center, Professor Kevin Gallagher, and colleagues at the GDP Center, and my research assistant, Ying Xu, for the work. So let me turn the page. This chapter has been focusing on structural transformation, not on debt, not on macro. So it's between macro and the micro level analysis. We started by introducing China's transformation, the dramatic upgrading of industrial structure, and then review Africa's transformation, whether there is a deindustrialization or not. And then we introduced the analytical framework of new structural economics. And in the empirical part of the work, we first identify Africa's bottlenecks in hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure. And then we ask the question whether Chinese-sponsored projects have addressed Africa's bottlenecks. That's a key question we want to answer. Then we look at the results of Africa's transformation, and we found that 18 countries have started transformation. In the last section, we discussed the prospects for the post-COVID era. Now, let me move on to the next. So the motivating question is, why is catching up so difficult? So we used the Medicine Project database. You can see the real GDP per capita in 2011 US dollars. On the left-hand side, you can see that after 60 years of development, the emerging markets and developing countries are still located at the lower half of the chart with a big income gap with the advanced industrial countries. And China, after 40 years of growth, China's per capita income at around $10,000. It's only 1/5 of those for advanced industrial countries. So 1/5, it's still far away from advanced countries. And on the right-hand side, you can see China used to be very poor, poorer than most African countries. And after 40 years of reform, openness, and growth, China's income, per capita income, is now about twice of the average for African countries. What is structural transformation? Structural transformation is a process in which a country's industrial structure moves from primary product, oil, extractives, agricultural, and to manufacturing industries, and gradually upgrading to machinery, equipment, manufacturing of automobiles, and then move up to the value chain to the advanced services. So that's structural transformation. As at the World Bank, we did some research on structural transformation and found it is positively related to job creation, innovation, and productivity growth. However, in Africa, this structural transformation has been very slow. This chart shows China's export structure. So in as late as 1984, 50%, you can see this on the left-hand side, this 50% of China's export was consisted of crude oil, coal, and minerals, and food, and agricultural products. And after reform and opening the special economic zones to attract foreign direct investment, and China was able to learn by doing and learn by exporting, and developed labor-intensive manufacturing industries. And now, after 2001, after China joining WTO, and China was able to attract more foreign direct investment and upgrade their industries into machinery, transport equipment, and etc. Now, China's export structure is more sophisticated, covering a whole, the entire value chain, including some high-tech products. Now let's look at Africa's transformation. You can see from this chart, there are two groups. One group of countries had a very high manufacturing value added, then gradually decline. That includes South Africa and Nigeria. Those countries have seen a premature deindustrialization. The second group is diverse and stagnated, and their manufacturing sector has never been developed. Only in the last 10 years, you can see an uptick of manufacturing value added in GDP in a few countries. including Ethiopia and Tanzania. So that's premature industrialization. Now let me introduce a little bit about Justin Lin's new structural economics. He wrote several books on the topic during his tenure at the World Bank since 2008. And the simple idea is that when we go to a country, we should not focus on what the country does not have. We should focus on what the country has, which means their endowment, their location, their minerals, and their existing industries, their comparative advantages. So here we use the World Bank's data on the changing wealth of nations. It gives you the per capita volume of natural capital and human capital and produced capital. Those three capitals are very important for growth and for comparative advantage. So we can look at each country and group 40 African countries into 4 groups. The first group is the arable land rich. Those countries, the yellow bar is arable land, the yellow bar. So those countries have comparative advantage in agricultural and agribusiness. They should focus on developing those sectors. The second group is abundant, labor abundant. So the orange bar indicates human capital per capita. So these countries can rely and develop on capital intensive products and export them, just like China in the 1980s and 90s. So they should export the labor intensive products. The third group is produced capital abundant. That includes South Africa, Nigeria, etc. And they have relatively abundance in produced capital. So they have a base for industries, and they should maybe focus on processing and processing of capitals and processing of chemicals, steel, and manufacturing of machineries. The last group is subsoil resource rich, meaning oil, mineral, and etc. So the blue bar indicates the subsoil resources. So these countries maybe initially rely on the export of minerals, and then gradually they can start to do processing and chemical industry, etc. So this is an introduction. However, in order for these countries to be able to export, they must have infrastructure. They must have roads, ports, and airports, seaports, as well as electricity. When we visited Africa 10 years ago, we often experienced blackouts. So electricity is a big problem. And you can see even in the 5-star hotels, a lot of blackouts at that time. So how to identify bottlenecks for structural transformation in Africa? We use the 5 indicators of hard infrastructure, including water, energy, road, air transportation, and telecommunication, internet access. And then what we did is to group 54 African countries into low-income countries and then middle-income countries. So within the group, we rank each countries by the 5 indicators of infrastructure. And then you look at a country's ranking order, ranking number, and pick the lowest ranking number as the bottleneck 1, which indicate the bottleneck 1 is the sector where investment is most needed, the sector with greatest needs. So, for example, for Ethiopia, here, bottleneck 1 is water. For Benin and Burkina Faso, bottleneck 1 is transport here in that order. So then we do similar things for soft infrastructure. And then we pick 4 indicators: health, education, environment, and government effectiveness. So this table summarizes all the indicators we selected. Then in soft infrastructure, we do the same, group the country in 2 income groups. We have 22 low-income countries and 34 middle-income countries. We identify their ranking number in terms of each indicator and pick the lowest ranking number as the bottleneck 1 among the 4 indicators. So you can see there is a good distribution of bottleneck 1, bottleneck 2, bottleneck 3. Then in the second step, we look at the China financed and co-financed completed projects in Africa. Here we updated our data using ChinaAidData.com version 2.0. And we look at the decomposition of these 3,126 completed projects. These projects, the subset of projects are completed and recommended for aggregates. So the indicator, this is indication of their high quality. So we filtered out those suspended and incompleted and canceled projects. So these are high quality completed projects. These completed projects actually form the part of the public assets for that country. So health represents the largest proportion of projects. 24% of the total projects are concentrated in health, 14% in education, but this is by project count. If we use project amount and do the decomposition again, we can find that energy and transportation and these are accounting for a big proportion of the investment account. And according to China's foreign ministry, China has built 6,000 kilometers of railroads for Africa, 80 power generation stations, and 20 seaports, and many schools and hospitals, etc. So now the question is, how many of these projects, completed projects, have matched with Africa's bottleneck? So in the third step, we merged the 2 databases by their country name, country code. We merge them and see the location of the sectors and the countries. So we can see that we found that 78% of the completed hard infrastructure projects have matched with bottlenecks in Africa. So you can see that in some of the sectors, in some of the countries, multiple projects were implemented for Benin, for these low-income countries. For Ethiopia, 9 projects were concentrated in transport. So this is according to the demand, the request of the host country. And then next, we found that in soft infrastructure, 74% of soft infrastructure projects have matched with Africa's bottlenecks, 74%. However, the other side is that 22% to 26% projects have matching problems. They have targeting problems. They have issues. Maybe they have targeted at the wrong sector, wrong time, and the wrong country. So they are not very effective. So we need to do more research work on those missing the target. In the section 5, we look at the Africa's future opportunities. Since Africa's population is growing very fast, and the countries they have negotiated and started the African continental-wide free trade area. So there's a huge opportunity for all African countries to trade with each other and trade within the continent and try to expand their market and benefit their population. According to Justin Lin's theory and East Asia's experience on flying geese pattern, we argue that if African countries can establish special economic zones and improve investment climate in those areas, try to attract foreign direct investment, then you can attract many manufacturing industries to relocate to your country in Africa. And we found a new study by Ernst Young that China's outward foreign direct investment create more jobs in Africa. I guess it is because China's industries are more labor intensive, so they create more jobs. And many of the projects implemented in Africa have hired a lot of local workers. So in the 4 period, 137,028 jobs were created in the 4-year period of 2014 to 2018. As a result of this collaboration of all partners, Africa's structural transformation has begun. We have seen 18 countries with an uptick in manufacturing value added in GDP since 2011. So you can see the chart, the curve is upward sloped. 18 countries have seen a structural transformation. Last but not least, this is a discussion on future prospects. So in order to summarize our result in one sentence, I can say that China has helped address Africa's bottlenecks in the last 20 years. So we have shown the percentage. However, there are 22 to 26% of projects with problems, with problems of mistargeting, including maybe some white elephant projects. So there are problems we should investigate. There is ample room for better targeting. Secondly, combining trade, aid, and investment. This is a market-based approach. We can better help Africa's transformation. We can align the interests of all parties, all partners. China must abide by ESG rules and give special attention to soft infrastructure. And China needs to stop financing coal-fired power plants, invest in more renewable energy. In the new data set, we found we used this 3,128 projects. We found 60% of the completed projects are in green sectors, 60%. In the future, in post-COVID-19 era, what should be done? Rethinking is needed on China's approach in Africa. So we suggest that China should strengthen support to multilateral development agencies, especially on debt restructuring. China is not experienced in debt restructuring. So in the previous workshop, our friend Qian Ying talked about Brady Bond approach, and those experience should be studied and discussed in China among intellectuals. Secondly, China needs to boost green investment to combat climate change. Here, we can use more new instruments, including equity-based investment. China CAD Fund and Silk Road Fund they are using equity-based investment and FDI. To improve transparency and accountability, China should enact a comprehensive foreign aid law. The current regulation on foreign aid and cooperation is very narrow. It's not comprehensive enough. It's not sufficient to regulate the behaviors of enterprises in overseas investment, and imposing and asking them to abide by international standards and transparency. So Chinese leaders have continued to commit to African cooperation, and I think working together with all the partners based on Africa's own plan, Agenda 2063. And then we use ideas for development from the South, such as the new structural economics. All partners can work together to provide opportunities to support sustainable development in Africa. I will stop here. Would like to have your comments and suggestions.
Thank you very much. I can hear a big round of applause out there in the world of Zoom. Excuse me, my camera continues to be a pain here. As I said earlier, when I introduced Dr. Yang, please put questions in the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see there's questions and answers, and introduce yourself. I'll read a couple at a time and allow Dr. Yang to respond. So here's the first one from Rick Roden. Rick is at Global Financial Integrity. He asks, do you think African governments are doing enough to use FDI and trade with China in a strategic way that supports their development? And as Ha-Joon Chang noted in his 2016 UNECA report, why do you think so many African governments do not more proactively use all of their remaining policy space for industrials policy that still exists, even after considering the constraints of WTO rules and other agreements? Rick is also an adjunct lecturer at the School of International Service at American University. That's one question. While we're waiting for others, I'll just put one other in there. I wonder. So you've shown that over the past 6 or 7 years, we've seen African nations slightly change the structure of their economy to have manufacturing as a percent of production. I wonder how that looks with respect to exports, manufacturing exports as a percentage of total exports, because true dynamism is the extent to which you can export some of these manufacturers. That's one question. How dynamic is this? And if Africa starts to build a lot of these, African countries start to build a lot of these capabilities, What dangers might there be that a new Asian tiger or diversification in China might become more productive and outcompete African exports in the sector and trigger even faster premature deindustrialization? That's largely what's happened in Mexico, Central America, and Brazil and Argentina, where they had built some industrial capacity, but then not fast enough relative to Asian competitors. Maybe you can take those two questions, and we'll wait for some others from everyone else. I'll hand it over to you.
Those are very, very good questions. On the first one, I will try my best to explain. Indeed, African countries have not used all their policy space in terms of industrial policies. What is the reason? Actually, I think in the new liberal economics, the industrial policy is a taboo issue. Even when I was at the World Bank, industrial policy has been a taboo issue. Ha-Ju Chang, of course, proposed industrial policy, and I am familiar with his book on kicking off the ladders. My experience is that Justin Lin, when he was the chief economist at the World Bank, he proposed the growth identification and facilitation framework, which is suggesting countries should target their comparative advantage and then use industrial policy to facilitate the growth. However, these reports were very much criticized within the bank. And so it is not fashionable. It is a taboo issue. Only in the recent years, industrial policy has returned to these international organizations. I think it's since the publication of the IMF report, Neoliberalism Oversold, that paper in 2016, then industrial policy has returned to the economic mainstream. Second question, how does the export structure changed? That's a very good question. I have not done any empirical study on that. We have done some country reports. Of course, the uptick in manufacturing value added is within the country, within the industrial structure of the country. However, the export structure would need to be analyzed country by country. So I have not looked at the export structures of many countries. But I think China is trying to do as much as possible to import some of the agricultural products, mangoes and other products to China, back to China. And then also invest a lot in agricultural technology demonstration stations and trying to invest in the green sectors in Africa. I'm sorry I haven't done much about the export structure. Sorry.
Oh, thanks so much. We have a bunch of other questions here. One of them is from Leonard Kaplan, a postdoctoral researcher from Göttingen University and the Kiel Institute. Says, thanks for a great presentation. You mentioned that the Chinese overseas investment is associated with the generation of jobs in Africa with respect to quantity. What do we know about the quality, in the skill level, working conditions? Is it helping to prevent premature deindustrialization, or is it accentuating it? That's one question. Another one is from Emiliano Castillo from the University of Pennsylvania. And Emiliano asks, has there been any interest shown by China to pursue foreign investment projects more multilaterally in the region? Or will the strategy continue to be bilateral in the region in particular? We have a question, one more from May Farid, who's a visiting scholar at Stanford. May says, thanks for a great presentation and looks forward to reading your book, which I put in the chat if folks want to get a link to it. May says, could you please say more about what you have seen around the decision-making processes around the choice of projects that are carried out? Project focus, the location, either decision-making process with or among Chinese actors or host countries or among both. May is particularly interested in the differences between hard infrastructure projects and softer projects like health and education. I'll let you take those three and we'll move to another.
Those are great questions. First, on the quality of jobs. Indeed, the initial stage of job creation was mostly in construction of infrastructure projects. So many of the local workers are working on the construction sites, and many of them become like foremen in construction and the drivers of construction equipments like bulldozers. But lately, a lot of jobs are created in the manufacturing activities, including assembly lines of cell phones and some other repair of high technology. Huawei, for example, and Zhongxin, they have a lot of branches in Africa and hired a lot of African workers. And through cross-fertilization, and these young people in Africa can gradually move from one country, from one sector to another sector, and they can gradually learn the skills and then create their own enterprises. So that's what we hope. Secondly, FDI in a multilateral sense, it's very difficult because for FDI, you need to establish industrial base in one country, in one location. It is very hard to establish special economic zones across country borders. So I'm not sure what do you mean by multilateral FDI. So I think initially it's all bilateral, but for special economic zones, they can attract Chinese firms to invest, as well as other foreign firms, France, maybe from Turkey, India, they can all invest and establish their branches in the special economic zone in one country. Third question regarding the choice of projects. The decision-making is quite complex. So it may include a bottom-up process. So the local localities, they approach some, they are both bottom-up and top-down. So the local government first approach the Chinese government and then propose some projects, and then the Chinese also relevant sector, relevant companies, they also consult with the banks and the local enterprises, and there is a process of some consultation between various actors. According to Deborah Brodgan's work, you can see a lot of players are in this area, providing both aid projects, sponsored, heavily subsidized, heavily concessional projects. There are also this PPP, public-private partnership projects. So it involves both the local government and enterprises, as well as Chinese government and banks and enterprises. So multiple players are in play in these countries.
Thank
Over
you.
to you.
Yeah, I see just two more questions here. One is from Jerry Harris, from the Global Studies Association. Jerry was struck by you noting that over a certain time period, over 60% of new financing was in green projects. Could you elaborate on the extent to which they're green and go deeper into what they are? And then Abdul Sufi from the University of Wisconsin asks, China's FDI in Australia, the United States, and several European Union countries have resulted in numerous failures because of a lack of due diligence by investing companies. Have Chinese companies, especially state-owned enterprises, had the similar kind of experience in Africa?
Okay, good question. First, on the first question on green investment, we look at the new data from China8.com version 2, and we subtract the subset of 3,128 completed projects. And then we look at the composition of green versus non-green sectors. And then we found that in energy per se, in energy sector, you can find about 50% projects in green and renewable energy, and the other 50% is in the other electricity generation, like coal-fired plants. So I remember there are 83 projects in renewable energy, but of course the division, the classification can be debatable. For example, I consider hydropower generation station is a green sector because hydropower is not polluting. So some other environmental protection, they could consider green of hydropower dams are damaging the environment. So we can debate on classifications. We also consider that in the 3,000 some completed project, we can identify services, agricultural and other services, health, education, they are all green sectors. So in total, 60% of the projects are in green sectors. What was the last question again?
Adolf Sufi from University of Wisconsin just said that according to him, Chinese FDI in Australia, the United States, and EU countries There's been a lot more failure because they don't meet due diligence standards. Do you find that for Chinese firms in Africa?
Yes, we have heard a lot of stories that Chinese enterprises may have ignored local labor, international standards, and environmental standards. But I personally, I haven't gone to Africa to investigate all these cases. So that needs a lot of field work. Personally, I haven't done the field work. But in this chapter, we also told a story that Chinese contractors, they are learning and adapting to local demands and the local weather conditions. For example, in the Agricultural Technology Demonstration Center, they have long learned technologies are locality specific. So if you introduce Chinese technology to those agricultural demonstration stations, you must adapt the local conditions and the condition and a specific technology may have to be learned from the local farmers.
Thanks so much. Before we formally thank Yan Wang for a great presentation today, let me tell folks about a few other things that are coming down here at the GDP Center. One of them is related to what we're talking about today, and that'll be on October 28th at 9 a.m. EST. And it'll be a book presentation by Paulo Nogueira Batista. Paulo or Dr. Batista was the former vice president of the New Development Bank in Shanghai, one of the major new BRICS institutions. He was also a lead negotiator for the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, a liquidity institution that the BRICS have created. And he will be giving a talk largely based on his new book called Progress and Shortcomings: The BRICS and the Finance Mechanisms They Created. And in addition to Paulo presenting his new book, we'll have four of some of the key experts on these issues joining us to comment on this. One of them will be Gregory Chin from political science at York University, Leslie Elliott Armijo from Simon Fraser University, who's also written a book about BRICS and economic statecraft, and Chris Humphrey, perhaps one of the West's leading experts on multilateral development banks. It'll be moderated by Magali Masamba, who's a postdoctoral fellow here at the GDP Center and also at the Center for Human Rights and International Development Law at the University of Pretoria. So we really hope you can join us on October 28th at 9 a.m. EST and also on November 17th at 9 a.m. EST to hear Yangtze Lu on Chinese overseas investments and what are some of the triggering factors when they get delayed or stopped. Until then, thanks so much. You can visit our webpage. Many of these publications have been posted in the chat. We look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Wang, for a great presentation.
Thank you, Kevin, for introducing.